Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other Friday to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Well, let's get going. Here we are at the 2018 Mockingbird Conference in New York, and for this, basically the first or one of the first times we're doing this in person, and not only that, I'm looking at a bunch of faces staring back at us, so do forgive us if this is just totally horrendous. But we're here in the chapel at St. George's, and I'm staring up at the arches under which my older brother was actually married, and this is where we used to eat for the Mockingbird Conference. When RJ, way back when it was fun. When you didn't have gray hair.
Do I have gray hair now?
No, you don't have gray hair.
That's just me.
I get a couple every so often, and then my wife plucks them.
RJ ages in reverse.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Same thing when I get a chest hair. My wife pop it out, stay smooth.
There are people in front of us.
I know. We're going to need some response, too. It's being really weird if you're just... I wish we had an applause light or something. It's going to be very... It's embarrassing. We can edit this, though, right?
Okay,
Oh, yeah. We can edit.
Okay,
we'll edit
great.
every time. Just edit all of it out. Well, I feel badly because I'm asking you guys to record this, and tonight you're both presenting. So, where are your nerves? What's your status report as you walk into New York City on April the 26th? RJ, you got a funny look on your face.
I'm excited. I feel more prepared than I usually do at this point, with 2.5 hours left to go. I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun. Beautiful day in New York. I know it's supposed to pour rain tomorrow, but always nice to come in from Long Island, coming from LaGuardia and see the jewel of the city, laid out in front of us. So excited to be here, excited for a great weekend.
Yeah, I'm excited too to be the chaplain. That's I feel like, do you guys remember the Hair Club for Men ad? And you were like, and I'm not just the president of Hair Club for Men, I'm also a member. Like, I feel like that's official now that I'm the chaplain. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. This is fun. The first thing that I thought of to talk about that came across our screens this week was the New Yorker put up something called GPS Directions for Adulthood by someone named Irving Buon. And it sort of apes GPS directions. It's a humor piece. I'll read parts of it to you. In half a mile, make a right onto Employment Street. You majored in philosophy and passed Employment Street. In 500 feet, make a U-turn onto Grad School Boulevard. You missed the U-turn, and your most endorsed skill on LinkedIn is quote-unquote Microsoft Word. Rerouting. In 3 miles, take the exit onto Therapy Avenue. Instead of exiting, you ran a red light while ranting about your sister Beth, who is a successful neurosurgeon and somehow still manages a side hustle selling charm bracelets on Etsy. Rerouting to Jealousy Road. Bear in mind that you can still find love. Beth met Dave while working 30-hour shifts during her residency. In 1,000 feet, make a left onto Intimacy Lane. You veered wildly off Intimacy Lane, rerouting to Fear of Commitment Parkway. In 2 miles, make a right. There is nothing interesting there, but the important thing is to keep moving forward, even if your only friend is the bartender at Applebees. I noted several points of interest for you nearby. There's a 24-hour Planet Fitness within 2 miles that you... Rerouting to Applebee's. I'll take you there, but I don't condone this. Look, this is against protocol, but I'm starting to worry about you. In 900 miles, make a left onto Moving Back In with Your Parents' Street. Rerouting to Pursuit of Happiness Expressway. Expect many tolls. Funny because it's true.
Yeah. I kept waiting for you to say, like, now you're on Vision Board Avenue. You know what I mean? Like, when everything falls apart, you just make a vision board, and then you get your life together. That's a joke.
What does your vision board look like, Sarah?
What is
Your
my
5-year plan? What's your
what is
5-year
my
plan,
5-year
Sarah?
plan? A lot of mac and cheese from the box. Yeah, and a lot of coffee. That's my 5. That's like what
That's
the
your
next.
5-minute
Yeah,
plan,
that's
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
You 5-hour plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Rutger?
We have a 3-pack of $10 Applebees gift cards lying in a drawer at home right now that someone gave us when we first came to St. Martin's because it's just a lovely church, and we've never used them. We're excited to use them. There are no Applebees close to us, believe it or not. We have to drive like 20 miles. So every time we go on vacation, we just say, this time we're going to go to Applebees. We're going to use this $30, but we never end up using them. So someday we will go. But don't get me wrong, we go to Outback Steakhouse and Chili's and other sort of Applebee's type places, but have not yet spent those $30.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Now you see why we're going to edit. Now
Yeah,
you see why we're gonna edit.
unbelievably interesting.
Yeah.
I like Applebee's. I mean, if we're talking about Applebee's, I like Applebee's. I've read that article. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
the neon drinks. There's nothing wrong with Applebee's.
Did you guys feel like you followed directions to adulthood? Are you there yet?
No, adulthood is when you realize that you have no control over anything and you give up, I think, and
Say more.
so yes, indeed. No, I mean, we just had a baby, and that was unexpected. We got a 15-year-old, a 13, as I talk about sometimes, 15-year-old, 13-year-old, year and a half old, just like we planned when we got married. We're like, this is how we want to do it. So I'll have kids in the home until I'm, 60-ish. 85, exactly. Never thought I'd be living in Houston, Texas, but love it. Didn't think I'd go to seminary in a burned-out steel town in rural, outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Life is kind of crazy, but you kind of learn to roll with the punches, God willing, and enjoy the ride.
Sarah, I was listening to an interview with you this week on Crackers and Grape Juice, and they were talking about how someone had slipped you, your mentor had slipped you some discernment books when you were a teen or something?
Yeah, when I was 18, a guy named Andy Andrews at St. Andrews in Jackson, Mississippi, he was like the curate there, slipped me a book about discernment. He was supposed to give me books about women in the Episcopal priesthood because my adult plan had been to never get married, and to be rector of a church with about 45 people on a Sunday in rural Mississippi, because I dream really big when I dream.
Yeah.
And at some point, like at 42, I would adopt foreign, not domestic. But that none of that worked out. But yeah, I was studying women in the Episcopal priesthood. There weren't a lot of women priests in Mississippi at that point in time, and he gave me a book about discernment. So yeah, it was a very, very much a
Since
Holy
then,
Spirit
it's just
thing.
been smooth sailing.
Oh yeah, it's been really easy.
So that
since
actually
then.
worked. The book on discernment actually worked.
I mean, it brought all of the plans for college to a screeching halt. But yeah,
Good.
yeah. I was supposed to go to college. I did go to college at the College of Santa Fe to major in musical theater. And I got there and I lasted a semester, which meant that I went to Ole Miss my freshman year, and my hair was about this long, and it was fuchsia, and I had a nose ring. And if y'all aren't familiar with the University of Mississippi, that's not exactly how you show up if you want to make friends. So
In the Glade.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, my friend, there's an organization in Charlottesville that has gotten a grant from the Lilly Foundation to do all of this stuff about vocation. And vocation's kind of a bit of a buzzword. I don't remember hearing about vocation. None of us, unless you were brought up in a Lutheran church or something like that, you don't really hear much about vocation. And then people got so excited about vocation about 10 years ago. And so everyone's talking about faith and work. And so they're implementing all of these vocation classes which are kind of like discernment classes with undergraduates. And they realized at the end of it that the result of it is that no one's going into ministry. They're all they're like, well, if God loves me, and can work through me when I make a lot of money, I might as well do that.
Go make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Why not?
That's smart.
That sounds wise. It was, and because, Will McDavid, who was talking about this, and he's written a lot about this on Mockingbird, but he was, do Americans really need to know that God values their work more than they already think that he does, Anyway, that's kind of has nothing to do with our conversation.
No, it reminds me of Devil Wears Prada, which I loved right up until the end because the Anne Hathaway character, she finds herself in a job that, despite herself, she actually really loves. She comes to actually love the job, and she's in Paris with Meryl Streep and whatever. And then she's like, no, but I'm going to go back to my original dream of what I thought I wanted to do. And it rang really false to me because if you actually have, by the grace of God, find yourself in a position where you are happy and enjoy what you're doing, do not leave that thing. Like maybe you're actually called to do that. And with regard to these undergraduates, what was I? I was a art history major. I started off as philosophy, and then
right.
anthropology, and then art history. And so my dad actually gave me really good advice. He said, hey, RJ, just undergrad, which I wasn't expecting, I got to say, to get good advice from him, but I did. He said, undergrad, do what you love, and for your career, grad school, and go spend some time figuring out what you actually want to do, as opposed to quite a few people I know who went straight into law school and then started to practice law and hated it, and now they have $250,000 in loans to pay off, and they don't know what they're going to do. So anyway.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Yes, exactly.
Well, on that note, Sarah, do you have anything Prada-related to share?
I don't. I learned such wonderful things about RJ just all the time, and now I've learned that
Like
you
what?
love The Devil Loves Prada. Or The Devil Wears Prada.
Until the end.
You singing that whole montage from The Little Mermaid on a podcast recently was a real eye-opener for me. So, would you like to do it for them?
No, but I will say the person next to me was watching Tangled on the way over, and I forgot the cord for my headphones, so I had the headphones but not the cord that connected. I was really jealous because I tear up in the rowboat scene every time with the floating lanterns. I do. It's another one of those movies that I watch with my boys, and they look over and they're like, "Dad, this is get it together," So anyway, I do love me some Tangled.
Well, speaking of movies,
the
second item to talk about is this new movie, I Feel Pretty, which is an Amy Schumer vehicle, which just came out, and I haven't seen it. It just came out. But Amanda Hess, writing in the New York Times, wrote something that was sort of right down our wheelhouse, and I'm fascinated to hear what you guys think. It's called I Feel Pretty and the Rise of Beauty Standard Denialism. She summarizes the movie this way. The down-on-herself Renee, played by Amy Schumer, conks her head in a soul cycle accident and awakens believing that she has miraculously become supermodel hot. She revels in it, charging into a bikini contest, snagging a promotion, and basking in the affections of a beefy corporate scion, only to discover that her looks never changed a bit. The benefits she thought she had accrued through beauty were won instead through her newfound self-confidence. Right? Sounds like a Hollywood movie. The movie suggests that the only thing holding back regular-looking women is their belief that looking regular holds them back at all. That attitude puts the onus on the individual women to improve their self-esteem instead of criticizing societal beauty standards writ large. And this is where it gets really interesting. Amanda writes, the reality is that expectations for female appearances have never been higher. It's just become taboo to admit that. This new beauty standard denialism is all around us. It courses through cosmetics ads, fitness instructor monologues, Instagram captions, and increasingly popped feminist principles. Keeping up appearances is no longer simply a superficial pursuit, it's an ethical one too. A woman who fails to conform to the ideal is regarded as a failure as a person. You're not caring for yourself enough. You're not, there's this kind of language. So now corporate entities are cynically encouraging women to engage in beauty and fitness routines to become better people, not more attractive ones. The beauty ideal is so pervasive that it is internalized in many women who are haunted by idealized visions of their own bodies, fantasies of how they might look after undergoing extreme diets or cosmetic procedures. Now, they highlight the Dove ads with sort of beauty in any shape or something like that, and I always thought those were kind of nice ads.
Wrong. You were right, yeah.
I feel totally unqualified to talk about any of this, I guess, but it's what I found interesting, and I'll continue to read, is this sense that we're feeling good about ourselves for maybe not appearing as superficial. But now, you have to look incredibly good.
The law's even higher. It's just higher and higher, and the bar is just constantly raised.
And you have to be, it has to be ethically self-realized. You're not doing it to please society or to please a man. You're doing it because you have integrity as a human being and self-willpower, and you're actualized. It struck me as, I'm not a woman, but I am married to one. And so I hear about this sort of thing all the time, and this beauty standard denialism. Sarah, I'm very interested to know what you think.
Well, there's a couple different thoughts that come to mind. The first one is I think about how women, there's the law of self-care that we have. And I love, that a lot of like what we interpret as self-care as women are like things that women on the Real Housewives of Orange County do, like you get your nails done or you get your hair done or you get all these things done all in the name of like taking care of yourself. And I don't know if you've ever sat in a nail salon for an hour and a half, but I don't feel great the whole time. I mean, it's not meditative. Jesus isn't there. You know what I mean? Like I feel guilty for having someone be at my feet, and I feel like I'm spending too much money on this. I mean, there's like all this head clutter, and then there's the end product, and I feel worse afterwards. But it's self-care, so that's something.
So it's justified.
Yeah. The other thing I think about that's interesting is that I'm so glad to be 35 and not 25 right now, because like at 35 you're just like, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? But like the current thing of like you've got a lot of really long hair, right? And then ladies, right? And then you pile it up in such a way that it's got to like stay on top of your head in like a messy bun. And then your clothes have to like look casual, but you have to spend a lot of money on them. And there's these pictures of women like modeling them, and like one thing is tucked into one side and one jean leg. And you're like, you see a picture of yourself later, when you think you've captured this look, and you just look pregnant again. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's so damning, this thing of being a woman right now.
Well, she goes on to say, beauty standard denialism has exploded online. This is something we all know. She writes, social media puts us ever more pressure on appearances, but also on projecting politically correct politics, including promoting concepts like body positivity, self-acceptance, and, quote, expanding the beauty ideal to incorporate diverse bodies. Ultra-slim models like Kendall Jenner and Bella Hadid parrot lines about how they, quote, unquote, didn't mean to lose weight, even though they post images on Instagram that appear edited to make them look even thinner. Women are expected to perform femininity and feminism at once. What's more, these women are meant to be naive to their own looks, like the heroine of Brooklyn, who was described in the screenplay to Brooklyn, Saoirse Ronan, I think, as open-faced pretty without knowing it. Our culture's ideal woman is beautiful and modest.
And stupid. I mean, that's interesting, right? That you would be really beautiful and put lots of effort into it and then be like, oh, me? What do you mean? I mean, like, what is that?
But you're supposed to be, instead of adopting a new ideal, it's actually, let's just do both.
Pile it all on.
Pile it all on. It sounds incredibly exhausting. Right?
Yeah.
RJ? I mean, I like to think of you as the second woman on the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm a happy medium between the two of you.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say because my wife could certainly talk about this. I mean, I have all brothers. She has all brothers. We have all boys, and I hate to say this, because sometimes I would love to have a daughter, but I also feel like it'd just be a lot harder in a lot of ways to deal with those pressures that I know that she would be under. So I don't quite know what to say about this, to be honest with you. It's depressing. It's sad. I hate it.
This book that Sarah and I read this past summer, I say that we read it because we were talking about it a lot, called The Unmade Bed. And it's got this incredible chapter called Girls' Crisis, Boys' Crisis. And to say that one is having a crisis does not mean to say that the other's not too. In fact, if you look at the data, the boys are underperforming. They're extremely sad. They're having a crisis too. Meanwhile, the women are expected to be goddesses.
Yeah.
Self-actualized, empowered goddesses with no weakness. And it's girls' crisis, boys' crisis. That's how I would like to see it. It's just like, it's the crisis of the law that is ratcheting up in ways that are so ingenious and finely calibrated that every time you think it can't get worse, it does. Now, this is how she ends it, because she says, why is it so hard to talk about this? I suspect it's also that it's simply too painful to address head on. The amount of brain power I spend every day thinking about how I look is a monumental waste. The sheer accumulation of images of celebrity bodies in my browser history feels psychopathetic or psychopathic, something like that.
I like psychopathetic too.
Feels psychopathic. I like to think of myself as a pretty smart person, but the truth is that I can't seem to think my way out of this. The only way I've found to banish momentarily that shadow of the idealized self is to pay for it to go away with a Sephora shopping spree or a spin class. Boom! You know, it's like,
Really good.
there you have it.
One thing I will say, I find this consistently depressing, is how our culture glorifies attributes at the end of the day people actually can't help. You know, Dave and I, you and I have talked about this, how with regard to food, I sort of feel like people, they have one of two attitudes toward food. They either, when they get really stressed out, they eat a lot, or when they get really stressed out, they stop eating. And I just happen to be in the second category, and it's not something because I have not gotten a physical in quite a while. It's sort of terrifying. I'm hoping that I'll die before I'm 50, so I never have to get a colonoscopy. But anyway, but I don't eat. Like literally a lot, and you know this about me, like I have 2 cups of coffee in the morning, I skip lunch, and usually when I get home for dinner, that's the first meal I've had all day. And when I do have lunch, I fall asleep at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so I hate it. And that has nothing to do with, it's not a choice. And then there's an article in Sports Illustrated about Charles Barkley that I remember like 15, 20 years ago when he was playing for the Phoenix Suns. And for all you sports fans out there, because I know Mockingbird is big on the sports fans. Charles Barkley is hilarious, by the way. You know who that is? The round mound of rebounds, Dave? Who did he play for before he played for the Suns, Dave?
Just keep talking,
yeah,
RJ.
Philadelphia
It's really
76ers.
interesting what
Anyway,
you're saying.
it is interesting. So he grew up in Alabama, you know, he's African American, and you would never think about this about him. Every night when he got home from a basketball game, he would vacuum his entire house. And all of his hallways were lined with mirrors, and he had to make sure that the vacuum lines lined up before he went to bed. Why do you think he was a successful basketball player? That's why. Because he was anal, because he was neurotic, because his attention to detail was so overblown. And a lot of the times you meet quote-unquote successful people, and there's a dark side to their success, you know, that they're compulsive, people overeat, they undereat, that people's wills are bound.
Right.
You know, but in our culture, we think it's just to make better choices, try harder, get educated, find a better strategy, but that's not true. People just are the way they are, and there's a certain set of behaviors that our culture has chosen to glorify and lift up, and another set that we've chosen to denigrate, when the reality is neither set of those people have really any control over who they are. So it's just sad. I just feel badly for people that have no control over themselves, but that leads them to make choices, quote unquote choices, that our culture doesn't value. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Mm-hmm.
It does. It's also why I think Mockingbird like ruins exercise classes for people, because if I go to an exercise class and the instructor's like, "You're doing awesome. If you can do this, you can do anything. You're amazing." The whole time I'm like in my head like, "That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie." Like, you know, I mean, there's freedom in being like, no, I actually like really like to eat ice cream when I'm stressed out, and I really don't like to.
Do you like to exercise? Or do you need to exercise?
I'm pretty neurotic about exercise.
My wife, like you, for example, you're an amazing writer, but you need to write.
Yes.
You have no choice.
It's
like you'll go
compulsive.
crazy if you don't write.
Compulsive.
Right? Like my wife needs to exercise. If she goes a few days without exercising, it's not a good scene.
Right.
Plus she's an introvert, so it's like the only time she gets alone because we have a small child.
Right.
So,
Well, one of the things I'm going to try to talk about in my talk a couple days from now is that the form that this takes when we talk about body positivity, it sounds like compassion. And it sounds like, and we talk about expanding the ideals of what's beautiful. It sounds great. I mean, I think that's, and in fact, the response to I Feel Pretty, the movie, has been basically like, what are you talking about? You're a blonde white lady. And like, if you search pretty woman in, if Julia Roberts doesn't come up, it's just white ladies with blonde hair, that's our culture's ideal. But where was I going with that? The form of it takes is compassion. It sounds like we're trying to be nicer to people, but the instrument of it is the law. Mm-hmm. And so you're shouting at people to expand their beauty ideal, to feel better about themselves, while also or else. And so it creates even more despair, I think. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but it's like this. It's in every area of the world right now. Especially when we're politicizing everything, what sounds like compassion, when the law is the way that you're trying to make people more compassionate, it backfires. And you have Amanda Hess saying, the only way I can escape this is by paying someone to distract me so hard from my idealized self and the low level and sometimes acute level of pain that I'm in all the time.
The most unfulfillable law is feel good about yourself, right? Like yourself. No one feels good about themselves except for psychopaths. Mm-hmm. Like you have moments. You have moments.
Yeah. No, I do want to say that this makes me feel so even worse for people who have beach weddings. Sorry if you had a beach wedding. But I feel like the expectation, this is like the best thing about a church wedding. Like 75% of it is done for you. You show up, it's pretty, they know the words. You don't have to write something that's awkward that you have to say about this person that you probably don't know that well, but you're going to make, But like a beach wedding, it always feels like a really anxious thing for me because not only is the bride, and now brides have to look casual, which freaks me out, but you have to look like, it's the same thing. It's the tousled hair, it's the is she pregnant dress, it's the whole thing. And you're at a beach and it's just, I don't know, it's like reminds me of why like getting married, especially as a woman right now, there's so many expectations. So just have them in churches. What's our next article, Dave? Yeah.
Plug.
I will say this. You may or may not know that the big to-do funeral, the Bush funeral, was at Sarah and my church this past weekend, and I actually had a wedding to do that Saturday night, and the rehearsal had to get canceled for obvious reasons. But the bride texted me on Thursday night, and her text was along the lines of, hey, I know this is a really important time for the Bush family and for the church and for the country as a whole, so I just want you to let you know that we're happy to flex in whatever way we need to.
So
and I showed it to on Thursday night, like before this, I showed it to my wife, and I was like, can you believe this? This is the greatest, this is the best person on earth. Mm-hmm. And so that was encouraging. Mm-hmm. One bride who was not, at least in that one moment, was not super anxious about getting married. Yeah.
Well, last but not least, I figured since we've just infiltrated New York, we should talk about ChickfilA.
Yes.
Yes.
There actually has been a ChickfilA in New York for a little while.
I know that.
In the NYU Student Center.
I'm aware of this ChickfilA movement. This dangerous ChickfilA thing that's happening. You might know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the New Yorker published this, what those in the biz call tone deaf editorial about Chick-fil-A opening 4 locations now in Manhattan, and him lamenting the fact that it was so popular because of its, I think he calls it creepy Christian traditionalism, but then goes on to talk about how dare they try to foster community with sort of reclaimed wood, as though every single other restaurant in New York, by the way, isn't doing that. Just go to Friend of a Farmer 2 blocks away. You'll know what I mean.
It'll look like a Chick-fil-A.
Trust me, there's no farm. It'll look like a Chick-fil-A, but it'll cost more and it won't taste as good.
There you go.
So, and it goes into all this stuff, like the chief, appeal of Chick-fil-A is comfort and palliative, and you just want to be like, no, have you had the spicy chicken sandwich? I mean, it's like, the frosted lemonade is really good, and it's
really
like $3, you know? And, anyway, it's not to weigh in about Chick-fil-A outside of the fact that it is delicious and the people are really nice and they never ask you, how you vote or what religion you are. But it is the fact that Stephen Carter a black guy who's like a professor of law at Yale, used to clerk for U.S. Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall, the famous justice. He wrote something for Bloomberg called The Ugly Coded Critique of Chick-fil-A's Christianity. And this is what he said. I thought it was worth recounting as we enter into New York, which is where I was born, and I have a huge amount of love for this place. When you mock Christians, you're not mocking who you think you are. A 2015 Pew Research Center study of race and ethnicity among U.S. religions provides some basic facts. In the first place, if you're mocking Christians, you're mostly mocking women, because women are more likely than men to be Christians. The greatest disproportion is found among black Christians, of whom only 41% are male. So you're mocking black women in particular. Overall, people of color are much more likely than whites to be Christians, and pretty devout Christians at that. Some 83% of all black Americans are absolutely certain that God exists. No other group comes close to this figure. Black Christians are far more likely than white Christians, 84% to 64%, to describe religion as very important in their lives. Of all ethnic groups, black Christians are the most likely to attend services, pray frequently, and read the Bible regularly. They are also the most likely to believe that their faith is the place to look for answers to questions about right and wrong. And they are, by large margins, the most likely to believe that the Bible is literally the inerrant Word of God. In short, if you find Christian traditionalism creepy, it's black people you're talking about. Around the globe, the people most likely to be Christians are women of color as well, not just in America. Which brings us to one last point from the Pew study. Among Latinos and Asians, Christians are overwhelmingly first-generation immigrants. I think he's saying something important. When you're mocking Christians, you're not actually mocking the Mockingbird Conference. Gosh, I'm off my game.
It's terrifying to be doing this in front of you guys.
Yeah,
Keep going, Dave. It's scary.
Well, I think it's a wise reminder that what he's doing is he's pitting people's fear of being racist versus fear of being homophobic or anti-Islamic, or it's like what Donald Glover's always doing on Atlanta. If you watch that show, he's pitting people's isms against one another because that's where we are, and it's very interesting to watch how people squirm when you're that wedded to one specific view of yourself as righteous. What happens when it comes up against a different view of righteousness? And I thought this was a wonderful thing, but it also reminded me of Silicon Valley this past week. I don't know if anyone watches that show. It's an HBO show that's very scatological and gross in a lot of ways, but also quite brilliant. It's done by Mike Judge. And they had this episode last week in which one of the programmers they were working with was described to a board. He was Richard Hendricks, the protagonist, was trying to normalize him to these other, get him to, hey, get to know this guy. He's a really great guy. He and his partner, they go to church, they go to Bible studies, and, they're just sort of, they just hang out all the time at church and all this stuff. And the guy afterwards, furious, he's like, I can't believe you did that. You outed me as a Christian. And all of a sudden, everyone's pulling out, all the investors are pulling out, and finally someone has to pull Richard Hendricks aside and says, listen, this is Silicon Valley. You can be polyamorous all the day long, and people will call you brave. You can put LSD in your cornflakes, and people will call you a pioneer. The one thing you cannot be is a Christian. And that plays into fears of persecution, I think, about our self-pity and all that stuff, which gets kind of gross. And yet, maybe there's something to it.
And yet, Pete Docter, is a Christian at Pixar, and there's a huge, amazing Presbyterian church in Menlo Park, right in the middle of Silicon Valley. And so yeah, point taken. But there are Christians in unexpected places.
How do you guys deal with, or do you think it's completely a scarecrow? Do you think, do you encounter any taboo, any kind of shame for being a Christian?
I think
or is it you just live in Texas?
The fastest way to not have friends, no, it doesn't have anything to do with where we live. The fastest way to not have friends is to go to your neighborhood women's book club and be like, oh, I'm an Episcopal priest and so is my husband. Because you're not just Christian at that point. And Houston's a pretty broad place, you know what I mean? And So we have people of all different religions in our neighborhood, and I can see women's faces. They're like, we're never hanging out. I mean, it's just like an immediate, like, she's not going to be fun. Why did she even come to this? Like, what's she going to say about the book? She's going to try to get me to come to her church. Like, it becomes a whole weird world to step into. And, you know, as somebody who's from the Deep South, I remember growing up with a lot of the super right, oh gosh, what's it called? Oh, where you save yourself for marriage. True love waits. I remember growing up with the true love waits stuff, not in my own household of origin. My parents were true love waits for college, but everybody else's houses were true love waits, and you know, you pray around the flagpole, and it had this just militaristic sort of feel to it at that point. And now I feel like I'm seeing the same thing on the other side, where you're just excluded from certain things. I mean, that's been my experience just at a, you know, trying to make friends level. I mean, saying you're an Episcopal priest as a woman is a lot for people to take in. I know that, because people are always like, voodoo, like what's an Episcopal, what's a priest?
Priestess.
You're, you know, priestess, yeah. And I'm like, that's my
Fertility
side hustle.
goddess.
That's my side hustle is voodoo. Okay, keep going.
Really, hardly any of our besides people that I work with, hardly any of our close friends are Christians, and in some ways are probably, I don't know, I guess would be kind of hostile, but at the same time, I feel like they have absolutely no idea what Christianity actually is, and these are highly educated, you know, people with PhDs, people who are astrophysics majors at Yale, and one of my good friends, and forgive me if I've told this story on the podcast before. This is the Yale guy who I love, and Paulie.
Yale gets a lot of love.
Paulie, I'll give you a shout out. But we were talking. He got into this really AI kick, this artificial intelligence kick, and about how the world's going to be taken by robots. And RJ, he's like, you know, people in your line of work may actually have a really important role here, you know, because someone's going to teach these robots how to be moral and how to make good moral choices, and that's your job, right? Your job is to make people moral. And I said, no, Paul. And at this point, we've been talking about it for like 2 years. I'm like, Paul, morality is not my job. Forgiveness is my job. I'm not there to make people good. I'm there to forgive them for the fact that they're not good. And then finally, I was like, have you ever read the Bible? He's like, you know, I've been meaning to. And his wife was a nun who ran away from a convent, and his father was studying to be like an Orthodox priest and left. So, and then they were hippies in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. Anyway, and then he went to Yale. But he went, I said, well, hey, I gave my Bible. I said, just read, don't read John because it's sort of confusing. Read Luke maybe, or Matthew. So just in Matthew, because it was the first one. And a week, 2 weeks later, I said, he said, so I read it. I said, so what did you think? I said, we've had these conversations. Don't let me prejudice you. What did you think of it? He's like, well, Jesus is totally different than I thought he would be. He's a wild man. He's crazy. And I said, okay. And what was the essential message? If you were to boil it down to one thing, he thought about it. He said, I feel like Jesus came and he said, you are all a total disaster. And you know what? You're all forgiven. And I said, yes, Paul, that is Christianity. And it actually, you know, sometimes I think to myself that it's up to me to be a really good preacher or teacher or evangelist. Sometimes it's just a matter of people actually reading the Bible. Like this guy who wrote this, or you know, the guy who wrote the New Yorker article, go read the Bible. Yeah. You know, it's ridiculous because it's so good. Jesus is so good. And Paul is so good, and there's so much good stuff in there. So quit pretending that you're educated when you have no idea what's in the Bible and in the New Testament. It doesn't take long. It's a short little book. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah.
For now.
Well, I think as we infiltrate New York with the next few days, I hope and pray that it's with maybe a little bit of humility and grace, and that Jesus, the actual Jesus, not the projection, not the stereotype, might he be present among us. So I think it's time actually to go into the other room. Thank you, guys.
The other room. What does that mean?
The sanctuary. The other room.
Enter
for those
the
who aren't here.
sanctuary.
Any parting shots, Sarah?
No, I mean, I just feel compelled to say this as a mother that I love Chick-fil-A because it's really easy to take your kids into. And Jesus is great. So.
Yes, try the frosted lemonade. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Brought to you by ChickfilA.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by the Narrativo Group, and if you like what you've heard, please do drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Until next time.